The gunshot that split the night air wasn't what woke Molly Brennan. It was the sudden silence that followed, the way every horse in the stable fell deathly still as if holding their breath for what came next. She jerked upright from her makeshift bed in the hay, heart hammering against her ribs, her father's old rifle already in her hands before her eyes fully adjusted to the darkness. The stable smelled of leather and horse sweat and the dusty New Mexico summer of 1882, but underneath it all was something else now, something that made her skin prickle with warning. The horses were spooked. She could see their eyes rolling white in the dim moonlight filtering through the wooden slats, and her own mount, a gray mare named Temperance, was stamping nervously in her stall. Molly pressed herself against the stable wall, listening. Outside, voices carried on the hot wind, low and urgent, and then came the sound of boots on hard-packed earth, moving fast. Her fingers tightened on the rifle. She had been sleeping in the stable for 3 nights now, ever since word spread through Santa Rosa that the Dalton gang was working their way south, stealing horses from every ranch and homestead they passed. Her father would have done it himself, but Jacob Brennan had taken a bad fall from a spooked stallion 2 weeks back and was laid up in the main house with a broken leg and 3 cracked ribs. That left Molly, 22 years old and stubborn as a mule according to everyone who knew her, to guard the 8 horses that represented everything her family had left in this world. The stable door creaked open and Molly raised the rifle, her breath caught in her throat. A silhouette filled the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, backlit by the pale moon. She could see the outline of a hat, the shape of a gun belt slung low on narrow hips. "Don't move," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've got a Winchester pointed at your chest and I know how to use it." The figure froze. Then slowly he raised his hands, palms out. "Easy now," he said, and his voice was low and calm, the kind of voice you'd use with a skittish horse. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Name's Cameron Walsh. I work the Triple Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of here." "I don't care if you work for the governor himself," Molly said. "We don't take kindly to strangers coming around in the middle of the night." "I understand that, miss, but there's men out there who mean real harm. I saw them heading this way about an hour ago, been tracking them since they hit the Petersons' place. Shot one of the hands and made off with 6 horses." He took a careful step forward, and Molly could see his face better now, strong-jawed and serious, with eyes that looked dark in the shadows. "That gunshot you heard, that was me taking down one of their scouts. The rest scattered, but they'll be back. They know you've got good stock here." Molly's mind raced. She had heard about the attack on the Petersons' ranch. Everyone in town had been talking about it yesterday when she went in for supplies. "How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know you're not one of them?" "You don't," he admitted. "But if I was, you'd already be in a bad way. I could have come in quiet, could have had a gun on you before you woke. Instead, I'm standing here having a conversation with a woman who's got enough sand to sleep in a stable with a loaded rifle." There was something that might have been respect in his voice. "Your daddy's Jacob Brennan, isn't he? Heard he got hurt. Heard he's got a daughter who's tougher than most men twice her size." Despite herself, Molly felt a flicker of pride at that, though she kept her face hard. "You seem to hear a lot of things." "Small territory," Cameron said simply. "Word travels." "Look, miss, I know you don't know me from Adam, but those men are going to come back, probably with reinforcements. You can't hold them off alone, and your daddy can't help. So here's what I'm proposing. Let me stay. I'll take the night watch, make sure those horses stay safe. Come morning, if you want me gone, I'll go. No arguments." Molly studied him for a long moment. Every instinct her father had taught her said to trust no one, especially not a stranger who showed up in the dark with a convenient story. But there was something about the way he stood, relaxed but alert, confident without being cocky. And his eyes, now that she could see them better, were honest. She had always been able to tell when someone was lying to her. It was a gift her mother said she had, and this man wasn't lying. Still, she wasn't about to let her guard down completely. "You can stay," she said finally, lowering the rifle just a fraction. "But I'm staying too. And this Winchester stays loaded and in my hands. You so much as look at those horses wrong and you'll be answering to more than just my daddy." A slow smile spread across Cameron's face, transforming it from merely handsome to something that made Molly's stomach do an unexpected flip. "Fair enough," he said. "Though I have to say, Miss Brennan, if you're planning to guard horses all night every night, you're going to wear yourself down to nothing. A person needs sleep." "I'll sleep when those thieves are caught or gone," Molly said stubbornly, though in truth she was already exhausted. 3 nights of fitful dozing had left her nerves raw and her body aching. But she couldn't risk it, couldn't risk losing everything her family had worked for. Her father had started this ranch with nothing but determination and a dream, had built it up horse by horse, and she would die before she let some gang of thieves take it all away. Cameron seemed to sense he wouldn't win that argument. Instead, he moved slowly into the stable, keeping his hands visible, and settled himself on a barrel near the door where he had a clear view of both the entrance and the horses. He pulled his revolver and checked it with practiced ease, then laid it across his knees. "Tell me about them," he said, nodding toward the horses. "Your stock." It was a transparent attempt to keep her talking, to keep her awake and alert, but Molly found herself responding anyway. There was something comforting about having another person there, someone to share the heavy silence with. "The gray mare is Temperance," she said. "Had her since she was a foal. My daddy bought her dam from a trader passing through. The bay stallion in the end stall is Whiskey, he's our best. Fast as lightning and smart too, we were planning to start breeding him this fall." She went through each horse, telling their histories, and Cameron listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions that showed he knew his way around horses. "You know a lot about them," Molly observed after a while. "Grew up on a ranch in Texas," Cameron said. "Been around horses my whole life. They're better company than most people, in my opinion." "Can't argue with that," Molly said, and was surprised to find herself almost smiling. They fell into a companionable silence after that, both of them listening to the night sounds. Molly found her eyes drawn to Cameron despite herself. He had taken off his hat, and she could see his hair was dark brown, a little long and shaggy like he was overdue for a cut. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He looked to be maybe 26 or 27, old enough to have some experience but young enough to still have fire in him. There was a scar on his jaw, thin and white, and she wondered what story lay behind it. As if feeling her gaze, Cameron looked over and their eyes met. For a moment something passed between them, some spark of recognition that made Molly's breath catch. Then he looked away back toward the door and the moment passed. "You should try to sleep," he said quietly. "I meant what I said, I'll keep watch. Those men won't get past me." "You don't even know me," Molly said. "Why would you do this? Risk yourself for strangers." Cameron was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My family lost everything to thieves when I was 16, he said. "Came home one day to find the ranch burned, the stock gone, my daddy shot dead in the yard. My mama died of grief 6 months later. I swore then that I'd never stand by and let it happen to someone else if I could help it." He looked at her again and his eyes were fierce. "So that's why, Miss Brennan, because I know what it's like to lose everything and I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Molly's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "about your family." "It was a long time ago," Cameron said, though his voice suggested the pain was still fresh. "But thank you. And it's Molly," she added. "You can call me Molly." That smile came back, warm and genuine. "Molly, then, and you can call me Cam." "Cameron always sounds too formal, like my mama's about to scold me for tracking mud in the house." Despite the tension, despite the fear that still thrummed through her veins, Molly found herself smiling back. "All right, Cam, but I'm still not sleeping. I'll rest my eyes a bit, but that's all." "Whatever you say," Cam agreed, but there was amusement in his voice that suggested he knew better. Molly settled back against the hay bale, the rifle still across her lap, and let her eyes drift half-closed. She told herself she was just resting, just giving her eyes a break from straining into the darkness. But the truth was, having Cam there made her feel safer than she had in days. There was something solid and dependable about him, something that made her believe he really would keep watch, really would protect the horses and her family's livelihood. She must have dozed off despite her best intentions, because the next thing she knew, a hand was gently shaking her shoulder and Cam's voice was low and urgent in her ear. "Molly, wake up, they're here." She was instantly alert, her fingers finding the rifle. Through the gaps in the stable walls, she could see torches moving in the darkness, at least 5 or 6 of them, spread out in a loose circle around the property. Her heart hammered. "How many?" "8 that I can see," Cam said grimly. He was crouched beside her, his revolver drawn. "Maybe more. They're smart, coming at us from all sides, but they don't know I'm here, which gives us an advantage." "What do we do?" Molly asked, and hated the tremor in her voice. Cam looked at her, and his expression was calm despite the danger. "We don't let them in, we make them think twice about trying." "Can you shoot?" "I can shoot," Molly said firmly. Her father had made sure of that, had taught her to handle a rifle from the time she was 12 years old. She might not be the best shot in New Mexico, but she could hit what she aimed at. "Good," Cam said. "Then here's what we're going to do. You stay here, cover the main door. I'm going to slip out the back and come around behind them. When they move in, you fire a warning shot. Let them know you're armed and ready. With luck, they'll decide it's not worth the trouble." "And if they don't?" Molly asked. Cam's jaw tightened. "Then we make them regret it." Before Molly could respond, he was moving, swift and silent as a cat, toward the back of the stable. She watched him disappear into the shadows and felt a sudden, irrational fear that she'd never see him again. Then she shook herself and focused on the task at hand. The torches were getting closer. She could hear voices now, rough and crude. "Brennan," one of them shouted. "We know you're in there, old man. Come out and hand over those horses, and maybe we won't burn your place to the ground." Molly's hands tightened on the rifle. She moved to the door, positioning herself so she could see out but remain mostly protected by the thick wooden frame. The torches had stopped about 30 yards out, and in their flickering light she could see men on horseback, their faces hidden by bandanas and hat brims. "My father's not here," she called out, keeping her voice strong and clear. "But I am, and I've got a rifle pointed at your friend in the brown hat. You come any closer and he's going to be missing more than just a horse." There was a moment of surprised silence, then coarse laughter. "A woman." One of them jeered. "They left a woman to guard the horses. Boys, this is going to be easier than we thought." "I wouldn't count on that," Molly said coldly, and fired a shot that kicked up dirt 2 feet in front of the lead horse. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider, and the laughter died abruptly. "The next one won't be a warning," Molly said. "Now get off our land." "You've got spirit, I'll give you that," a new voice said, and a man urged his horse forward a few paces. He was bigger than the others, with a thick beard and cruel eyes. "But spirit won't stop bullets, sweetheart. We're taking those horses one way or another. You can make it easy or you can make it hard. Your choice." "I choose hard," Molly said, and raised the rifle to her shoulder. The man laughed, a sound like grinding gravel. "All right, boys, go get—" He never finished the sentence. A gunshot cracked from behind them, and one of the torches dropped to the ground as its holder fell from his horse with a yelp of pain. The horses scattered in panic, and the men were shouting, wheeling around to face this new threat. "Next man who moves gets worse than a flesh wound." Cam's voice rang out from the darkness. "Drop your weapons and ride out, or I drop you, your choice." For a tense moment, everything hung in the balance. Then the bearded man cursed viciously. "It's not worth it," he snarled to his companions. "Too many guns, not enough cover. We'll find easier pickings elsewhere." "What about Lyle?" one of them asked, gesturing to the man who had fallen. "Leave him," the leader said coldly. "He's slowing us down anyway." They wheeled their horses and rode off into the night, the torches bobbing and weaving as they went. Molly waited, hardly daring to breathe until the last light had disappeared and the thunder of hoofbeats had faded to nothing. Then her legs gave out and she sat down hard on the stable floor, the rifle clattering beside her. Cam appeared a moment later, materializing out of the shadows like a ghost. He holstered his gun and dropped to one knee beside her. "You all right?" "Fine," Molly managed, though her whole body was shaking. "I'm fine. Are they really gone?" "For now," Cam said. "They might come back with more men, but I doubt it. Word will spread that the Brennan place is defended and they'll move on to softer targets." He reached out and gently took the rifle from her hands, setting it safely aside, then covered her trembling fingers with his own. "You did good, Molly. You were brave." "I was terrified," Molly admitted, looking down at their joined hands. His were calloused and warm, strong and steady where hers shook. "Brave and terrified aren't mutually exclusive," Cam said quietly. "In fact, I'd say you can't be truly brave unless you're scared. Courage is doing what needs doing even when you're afraid." Molly looked up at him, at the strong lines of his face softened by concern, at eyes that held nothing but respect and something else, something warmer. "Thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't been here—" "But I was," Cam said firmly, "and I'll stay as long as you need me to. Until those thieves are caught or your daddy's back on his feet, whichever comes first." "You can't just put your life on hold for us," Molly protested, though part of her desperately wanted him to do exactly that. "You said you work the triple bar, they'll be expecting you." "I'll send word," Cam said. "My boss is a good man, he'll understand. Besides, I'm owed some time. I've been working double shifts for 3 months straight." He smiled slightly. "And I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be right now than right here." There was something in the way he said it, in the way he was looking at her, that made Molly's breath catch. She was suddenly intensely aware of how close they were, of the warmth of his hand still covering hers, of the way the moonlight caught in his dark eyes. She should pull away, should put some proper distance between herself and this man she had just met, but she found she didn't want to. "I should check on that man," Cam said finally, though he made no move to get up. "The one I shot. Make sure he's not bleeding out in the dirt." "Right," Molly said, and this time she did pull her hand back, though it felt like a loss. "Of course." They found the would-be horse thief huddled against a rock, clutching his shoulder and moaning. The bullet had gone clean through the meat of his arm, painful but not life-threatening. Cam bounded up with rough efficiency while Molly kept the rifle trained on the man, though he seemed too miserable and frightened to cause any trouble. "What's your name?" Cam asked as he tied off the bandage. "Lyle Henderson," the man muttered. "And I wasn't trying to hurt nobody, I swear." "I just needed the money." "Stealing is stealing," Molly said sharply. "You could have gotten people killed tonight." "I know," Lyle said miserably. "I know, I'm sorry. I've got a family, a wife and 2 little ones, and I lost my job at the mine. I didn't know what else to do." Cam and Molly exchanged a glance. "Where are you from?" Cam asked. "Silver City," Lyle said. "About 40 miles west." "All right," Cam said, making a decision. "Here's what's going to happen. Come morning, you're going to ride out of here and you're never going to come back. You're going to tell anyone who asks that the Brennan place is defended and not worth the trouble. And then you're going to go home to your family and find honest work." "Understood," Lyle nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I swear I'll never save it," Cam said. "Just be grateful Miss Brennan here is more merciful than you deserve." He hauled the man to his feet. "Now you're going to spend the rest of the night in the barn and we're going to lock you in. Try anything stupid and mercy will be the last thing on my mind." They secured Lyle in a storage room at the back of the barn, and Cam wedged the door shut with a heavy timber. By the time they were done, the sky was starting to lighten in the east, the deep black fading to purple and then to the soft pink of dawn. Molly stood outside the stable, watching the sunrise and feeling the adrenaline slowly drain from her body, leaving her exhausted and shaky. Cam came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It's beautiful," Molly said softly, watching the colors spread across the sky. "I never get tired of New Mexico sunrises." "No," Cam agreed, but when Molly glanced over, she found he wasn't looking at the sky, he was looking at her. When he realized he'd been caught, he cleared his throat and looked away, a faint flush coloring his weathered cheeks. I mean, yes, it's beautiful. The sunrise. Molly felt her own cheeks warm and she bit back a smile. We should probably go tell my father what happened, she said. He's going to be beside himself when he hears about this. Jacob Brennan was indeed beside himself, sitting up in bed and demanding to know every detail despite the pain it clearly caused him to move. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, with iron-gray hair and fierce blue eyes that Molly had inherited. Even laid up with injuries, he was formidable. And you, he said, turning those fierce eyes on Cam, you just happened to be passing by in the middle of the night. Yes, sir, Cam said calmly, not at all intimidated. I was tracking the gang that hit the Petersons' place, followed them here and arrived just in time. Mighty convenient, Jacob said suspiciously. Daddy, Molly said firmly. Cam saved our horses, probably saved my life too. You could show a little gratitude. Jacob studied Cam for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. You're right, he said gruffly. Thank you, son, I'm in your debt. No debt, Cam said. I did what anyone would do. Not anyone, Jacob said. Most men would have ridden on by, not wanted to get involved. The fact that you didn't says something about your character. He shifted in the bed, wincing. Molly tells me you offered to stay on, help guard the place until this gang is caught or I'm back on my feet. That's right, Cam confirmed. Then I accept, Jacob said. We can pay you, not much, but I don't want payment, Cam interrupted. Room and board is enough. A man should be paid for his work, Jacob insisted. Then pay me in home-cooked meals, Cam said with a smile. I've been eating my own cooking for too long and I'm heartily sick of it. Despite himself, Jacob laughed. All right, son, you've got yourself a deal. He looked at Molly. Take him to the guest room, get him settled, and then both of you get some sleep. You look dead on your feet. Molly showed Cam to the small guest room at the back of the house, suddenly shy now that they were alone again. The room was simply furnished with a bed, a washstand, and a chair, but it was clean and the window looked out over the ranch lands, stretching away to the distant mountains. It's not much, Molly said, but it's comfortable. It's perfect, Cam said. He set his saddlebags down and turned to her. Thank you, Molly, for trusting me, for letting me help. Thank you for offering, Molly said. She hesitated, then added, I'm glad you were there last night. I'm glad you're here now. Something warm flickered in Cam's eyes. So am I, he said softly. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. Then Molly cleared her throat and stepped back. I should let you rest, she said. If you need anything, just holler. Molly, Cam said as she turned to go. She looked back and he smiled at her, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. Sleep well. You too, she managed, and fled before she did something foolish like throw herself into his arms. In her own room, Molly lay down on her bed and closed her eyes, but sleep was elusive. Her mind kept replaying the events of the night, kept returning to the feeling of Cam's hand on hers, the way he had looked at her in the sunrise light. She barely knew him, she reminded herself sternly. He was a stranger, a drifter who had shown up out of nowhere. She had no business developing feelings for him, but even as she thought it, she knew it was already too late. There was something about Cameron Walsh, something that called to her on a level she didn't fully understand. It was more than just gratitude for his help, more than simple attraction, though there was certainly that. It was the way he had listened when she talked about the horses, really listened, like what she had to say mattered. It was the courage he had shown, the way he had put himself at risk for people he didn't even know. It was the respect in his eyes when he looked at her, like he saw her as an equal rather than just a woman to be protected and coddled. Molly rolled over and punched her pillow, frustrated with herself. She was being ridiculous. Cam would stay until her father was healed or the threat was past, and then he would leave. That was the way of things. Cowboys were drifters by nature, always moving on to the next job, the next adventure. She would be a fool to think otherwise. But even knowing that, She couldn't stop the small flutter of hope in her chest, couldn't stop herself from imagining what it might be like if he stayed. When Molly woke, the sun was high in the sky and the house was filled with the smell of cooking food. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, following her nose. What she found there made her stop short in the doorway, stunned. Cam was at the stove, an apron tied around his waist, flipping pancakes with easy confidence. He had cleaned up since she last saw him, shaved and changed his shirt, and his damp hair suggested he had washed at the pump. He looked completely at home in her kitchen, and the sight did strange things to Molly's insides. "You're cooking," she said, stating the obvious. Cam looked over his shoulder and grinned. "I told your father I'd work for home-cooked meals, didn't specify who'd be doing the cooking." He slid a perfectly golden pancake onto a plate. "Sit, you need to eat." Molly sat, too surprised to argue. Cam set a plate in front of her, piled high with pancakes and bacon and fried eggs. Her mouth watered. "This looks amazing." "My mama taught me," Cam said, settling into the chair across from her with his own plate. "She said a man who couldn't cook was a man who'd starve or drive his wife crazy. So she made sure my brothers and I could all handle ourselves in a kitchen." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his family, but it passed quickly. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Molly had to admit the food was as good as it looked. Better, even. "You're full of surprises, Cam Walsh," she said. "I try to keep life interesting," Cam said with a smile. "Your father ate already. I took a tray up to him. He seemed in better spirits today." "That's good," Molly said. She hesitated, then asked, "Did he say anything about last night?" "About the gang? He said there's a U.S. Marshal coming through Santa Rosa next week," Cam replied. "Planning to meet with him, let him know what happened. The more incidents we can document, the better chance they have of catching these men." "Good," Molly said. The thought of those men still out there, threatening other families, made her stomach clench. Over the next few days, Cam settled into life on the ranch as if he had always been there. He rose before dawn to tend to the horses, mending fences and fixing a loose board on the barn door that had been bothering Jacob for weeks. He took over most of the heavy work, the things Jacob couldn't do laid up, and he did it without complaint or fanfare. In the evenings, he and Molly took turns keeping watch, though increasingly they kept watch together, sitting in the stable and talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Molly learned that Cam had two younger brothers, both killed in the same raid that took his parents. She learned that he had spent years drifting, unable to settle, haunted by guilt that he hadn't been there to protect his family. She learned that he loved horses and wide open spaces, that he had a scar on his ribs from a bull that had tried to gore him, that he could play the harmonica but only one song, and that his favorite food was apple pie. Cam learned that Molly's mother had died when she was 15, carried off by fever, and that she and her father had been alone ever since. He learned that she had wanted to be a teacher when she was younger, had loved books and learning, but the ranch needed her, and so she had stayed. He learned that she was fiercely loyal, wickedly funny when she relaxed her guard, and that she could outride half the men in the territory. He learned that she was afraid of thunderstorms but would never admit it, that she hummed when she worked, and that her eyes turned the color of summer sky when she laughed. They were falling in love, though neither of them said it aloud. It was there in the way Cam's eyes followed Molly around the ranch, in the way Molly found excuses to be near him. It was in the accidental touches that lingered a moment too long, in the comfortable silences that stretched between them. It was in the way Cam made her coffee just the way she liked it without being told, in the way Molly mended the tear in his jacket without being asked. On the 6th day, they were in the stable together, brushing down the horses after a long day. The evening light slanted through the open door, turning everything golden, and somewhere in the distance a meadowlark was singing. Molly was working on Temperance, running the brush in long, smooth strokes when Cam spoke. "I've been thinking," he said, not looking at her, focused on the bay he was grooming. "About what?" Molly asked, though her heart had started to beat faster. About staying, Cam said. After your father's healed, I mean, if he'd want that. Molly's hands stilled on the brush. She turned to look at him and found him watching her now, his dark eyes serious. You want to stay? She asked, hardly daring to believe it. I do, Cam said simply. I know we haven't known each other long, I know it's crazy. But I feel like I've been drifting my whole life, looking for somewhere to belong, and I think maybe I've found it, here, with you. He set down his brush and took a step toward her. If I'm reading this wrong, if you don't feel the same, just say so and I'll never mention it again. But I had to tell you, I had to be honest. Molly set down her own brush with trembling hands. You're not reading it wrong, she whispered. I feel it too, Cam. I've been trying not to, trying to tell myself it's too fast, too soon, but I can't help it. When you're around, everything feels right. When you're not, I'm just counting the minutes until you come back. Cam's face transformed, joy lighting his features from within. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides and took her hands in his. Molly Brennan, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I know I don't have much to offer. I don't have land or money or anything a woman deserves, but I can work hard and I can love you with everything I have. Would that be enough? It's more than enough, Molly said, tears pricking her eyes. It's everything. Cam raised one hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek with infinite tenderness. Can I kiss you? He asked softly. In answer, Molly stretched up on her toes and closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but then it deepened, becoming something fierce and claiming. Molly's arms came up around Cam's neck and his wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest, could taste the sweetness of hope on his lips. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cam rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I know it's fast, but I do. I think I started falling the moment you threatened to shoot me. Molly laughed, the sound bright and free. I love you too, she said. And yes, we should probably tell my father before he hears it from someone else. Jacob Brennan took the news with less surprise than Molly expected. I'm not blind, he said gruffly, though his eyes were twinkling. I've seen the way you two look at each other, like the sun rises and sets by the others say so. He looked at Cam seriously. You treat her right, you hear me, she's all I've got in this world. I will, sir, Cam said earnestly. I swear it. And you love her. Truly, more than anything, Cam said without hesitation, and Molly's heart swelled. Then you have my blessing, Jacob said. Both of you. God knows this ranch could use another strong back, and I can't think of a better man for my daughter. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Santa Rosa, with half the town in attendance. Molly wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years, and carried wildflowers that Cam had picked for her that morning. As they stood at the altar, holding hands and making their vows, Molly felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The Dalton gang was caught 2 weeks after that, rounded up by a posse led by the U.S. Marshal. Lyle Henderson, true to his word, had testified against them, and every member was either killed in the capture or sentenced to hang. The territory breathed a collective sigh of relief, and life returned to normal. Cam threw himself into ranch work with an enthusiasm that impressed even Jacob. He had a gift with horses, a natural way with them that had them trusting him within minutes. Under his guidance, they started breeding whiskey to select mares, building up a line of quality stock that soon had buyers coming from as far as Texas and Colorado. The ranch prospered in a way it never had before, and Jacob, healed now and moving around freely again, was quick to credit his new son-in-law. Best thing that ever happened to this place, he told anyone who would listen. That boy showing up when he did, that was providence, pure providence. Molly couldn't argue with that. Lying in bed next to Cam at night, his arms warm around her, she marveled at how completely her life had changed. A few months ago, she had been alone, terrified, sleeping in a stable with a rifle. Now she was a wife, a partner in a thriving ranch with a future so bright it sometimes scared her. "What are you thinking about?" Cam asked one night, his voice drowsy in the darkness. "How lucky I am," Molly said honestly. "How different everything is now." "I'm the lucky one," Cam murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I found my home, found you, that's more than I ever dared to hope for." "I love you," Molly whispered. "I love you too," Cam replied. "Always will, you and whatever comes next for us." What came next, as it turned out, was a son. Molly realized she was pregnant in early spring of 1883, and the baby was born that autumn, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. They named him Jacob Cameron Walsh, after both grandfathers, though everyone called him Jake. Cam was a natural father, patient and loving, bouncing the baby on his knee and singing him soft songs in the evening. Watching them together, Molly felt her heart might overflow. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. This family they had built, this life they were living. It was everything she had never known she wanted. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Emma Grace, with strawberry blonde hair and a smile that could melt hearts. She was followed 3 years after that by another boy, Thomas, called Tommy, who was adventurous from the moment he could crawl. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Jacob, getting older now but still sharp as a tack, gradually turned more and more of the operations over to Cam and Molly. They worked as a team, complementing each other's strengths, and the ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. They added cattle to their operations, diversifying, and bought up adjacent land when it came available. What had started as a struggling horse ranch became an empire, though they never forgot where they came from. In 1887, they built a new house, bigger and more comfortable, with enough room for their growing family and Jacob's old age. But they kept the old stable, the one where Molly had slept with a rifle, where Cam had first offered to take the night watch. It became a sort of shrine to them, a reminder of where their story had begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Molly asked Cam one evening as they stood outside that old stable, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The children were playing nearby, their laughter ringing out across the ranch. "Coming here that night, staying when you could have moved on." Cam looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret," he said. "Molly, marrying you, building this life with you, it's the best thing I ever did. The only thing I regret is all those years I spent drifting before I found you, all that wasted time." "Not wasted," Molly said, leaning into him. "You had to drift so you could end up here with me. It all led to this." "Then I guess it was worth it," Cam said, wrapping his arms around her. "Every lonely mile, every hard night, it was all worth it to end up here." They stood there as the sun sank lower, painting the world in gold and shadow, and Molly thought about that night so many years ago. She had been so scared, so desperate to protect her family's livelihood. She never could have imagined that the stranger who walked through that stable door would become her entire world. Jake came running up then, all of 6 years old, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, can we go riding tomorrow? You promised you'd take me up to the North Ridge." "I did promise that, didn't I?" Cam said, ruffling his son's dark hair. "All right, first thing in the morning, but you have to help me with the evening chores first." "I will," Jake said eagerly, and ran off to start before he was even told what needed doing. "He's just like you," Molly said with a smile. "Can't sit still, always wanting to be doing something." "Poor kid," Cam said, but his eyes were proud. "Cursed with his father's restlessness." "Not cursed," Molly corrected. "Blessed. That restlessness brought you to me, remember?" "How could I forget?" Cam said and kissed her softly. "Best night of my life." As the years rolled on, the Walsh Ranch became legendary in New Mexico. People came from all over to buy their horses, renowned for their speed and intelligence and steady temperament. Cam trained them personally, using techniques he had learned and developed over years of working with horses, and every animal that left the ranch was a testament to his skill and patience. Molly took over the business side of things, proving to have a head for numbers that astounded even her. She negotiated deals, managed the books, and kept everything running smoothly. Together, she and Cam were unstoppable, a partnership built on love and mutual respect and a shared vision for their future. Jacob lived to see his grandchildren grow, lived to see the ranch succeed beyond his wildest dreams. He passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1892, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains he had loved. At the funeral, Cam spoke about the man who had become like a father to him, who had welcomed him into his family without hesitation. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. Life went on as it always does. The children grew, Jake into a tall, serious young man who inherited his father's way with horses, Emma into a beautiful, spirited woman who had her mother's sharp mind and fierce independence, and Tommy into a charming rogue who could talk his way out of any trouble. They were all a credit to their parents, all good people with kind hearts and strong values. In 1895, Jake married a sweet girl from Santa Rosa named Sarah, and they had a baby boy the following year, making Cam and Molly grandparents for the first time. Holding that tiny infant in her arms, Molly marveled at how life had a way of coming full circle. She thought about her own mother gone so many years now, and wished she could have known her grandchildren, could have seen how well everything had turned out. "She knows," Cam said softly, reading her thoughts as he so often did. "Wherever she is, she knows, and she's proud of you." "I hope so," Molly said, blinking back tears. "I hope she knows I tried to honor her memory, tried to be the kind of woman she raised me to be." "You did more than that," Cam assured her. "You surpassed it. You built something amazing here, Molly, a legacy that will last generations." "We built it," Molly corrected. "You and me together." As the new century approached, Cam and Molly began to slow down a bit, letting their children take on more of the ranch work. Jake was more than capable of running things, and Emma, who had decided against marriage in favor of helping run the family business, had a shrewd business sense that kept them competitive in changing times. Tommy, after a few wild years of wandering, had settled down and taken charge of the cattle operations. Cam and Molly spent their days doing the things they loved, working with the horses for pleasure rather than necessity, taking long rides through the lands they had built their life on, sitting on the porch in the evenings and watching the sun set. They grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces lined with years of laughter and love. One evening in 1899, as they sat outside the old stable where it had all begun, Cam took Molly's hand. "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "The night we met." "Like it was yesterday," Molly said. "I was so scared, so determined to be brave." "You were the bravest person I'd ever met," Cam said. "Still are, brave and beautiful and everything I ever wanted." "You changed my life that night," Molly said softly. "When you walked through that door and said you'd take the night watch, I didn't know it then, but you were offering me everything. A future, a family, a love I never dreamed possible." "I was the one who got everything," Cam said. "I was drifting, lost, broken from losing my family. And then I found you, and suddenly I had a reason to stop drifting. Suddenly I had a home." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, watching the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house they could hear their grandchildren laughing, the sound bright and full of life. "We did good," Molly said eventually. "Didn't we?" "We did great," Cam corrected, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "We built a life, raised a family, created something that will last long after we're gone. What more could anyone ask for?" "Nothing," Molly said. "Nothing at all." In 1902, on a warm autumn evening much like the one where they had first kissed, Cam and Molly celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party, inviting everyone from miles around, and the ranch was filled with music and laughter and good food. Friends and neighbors came to congratulate them, to toast to their long and happy marriage, to celebrate a love story that had become something of a legend in the territory. "Tell us how you met," Sarah, Jake's wife, begged. I've heard bits and pieces, but I want to hear the whole story. So Cam and Molly told it, taking turns, filling in details for each other, laughing at the memory of how suspicious Molly had been, how stubbornly she had refused to sleep even though she was exhausted. They told about the attack, about standing together against the thieves, about the sunrise that had followed and the feelings that had bloomed between them. I was sleeping in the stable to guard the horses, Molly said, smiling at the memory. And this cowboy walked in and said he'd take the night watch. Best decision I ever made, Cam added, his eyes on his wife, offering to help, offering to stay. Best decision I ever made was letting you, Molly replied. The party went late into the night, and when everyone had finally gone home or found beds to sleep in, Cam and Molly walked out to the old stable one more time. It was their tradition, coming here on special occasions, remembering where it all began. 20 years, Cam mused. Feels like a lifetime, feels like yesterday. Both, Molly agreed. She leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders automatically, and they stood looking out at the ranch spread before them in the moonlight. Do you ever wonder how different things would have been if you hadn't come that night? If you had ridden past? I try not to, Cam admitted. The thought of not having this, not having you, it's unbearable. But you did come, Molly said. You came and you stayed and you loved me. That's all that matters. That's all that matters, Cam echoed. They celebrated many more anniversaries after that, each one a testament to the enduring love they shared. They watched their children marry and have children of their own, watched the ranch continue to grow and change with the times. The old ways were fading, the Wild West becoming something of the past. But the Walsh Ranch endured, a monument to hard work and dedication and the power of love to transform lives. In 1910, on a perfect spring day with wildflowers blooming across the ranch lands, Cam and Molly sat on their porch, both well into their 50s now but still vital, still in love. Their hair was white, their faces weathered by years of sun and wind, but their eyes still sparkled when they looked at each other. I've been thinking, Cam said, and Molly laughed. That's dangerous, she teased. I've been thinking, Cam continued, grinning at her, about all the things I'm grateful for, and I realize the list is too long to count. But at the top of it, above everything else, is you. The fact that I got to spend my life with you, build a family with you, grow old with you. That's the greatest gift I could have asked for. You're going to make me cry, Molly said, but she was smiling through the tears already gathering in her eyes. And I'm grateful too. For you, for our family, for this life we built together. For that night in the stable when a cowboy walked in and changed everything. He didn't just change everything, Cam said, reaching over to take her hand. He found everything, found his purpose, his home, his heart, all in one stubborn, beautiful woman with a rifle. And she found hers, Molly said softly, in a drifter with kind eyes and a hero's heart. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, content in the companionship of long years and deep love. Around them, the ranch bustled with activity, their children and grandchildren going about the work of keeping the place running. But here on the porch, time seemed to slow, and for a moment it was just the two of them, the way it had been that first night in the stable. I'd do it all again, Cam said eventually. Every moment, every challenge, every triumph, I'd do it all exactly the same just to end up here with you. Me too, Molly said. 1,000 times over. Their legacy continued long after they were gone. The Walsh Ranch remained in the family for generations, each one adding to the story, building on the foundation that Cam and Molly had laid. The old stable was eventually converted into a museum of sorts, preserving the history of that fateful night when everything changed. Visitors came from far and wide to see it, to hear the story of the woman who slept in the stable to guard the horses, and the cowboy who said he'd take the night watch. But the real legacy wasn't the land or the buildings or even the success of the ranch. It was the example of love they had set, the proof that sometimes the greatest adventures come from the simplest acts of courage and kindness. It was the reminder that home isn't a place but a person, and that love, real love, is worth fighting for. Years later, long after both Cam and Molly had passed, their great-granddaughter stood in that old stable, holding her own newborn son. She looked around at the weathered wood, at the place where her great-grandparents had fallen in love, and she thought about the courage it must have taken for Molly to face those thieves, the leap of faith it must have taken to trust a stranger in the night. "Your great-great-grandmother was sleeping here to guard the horses," she told the baby, even though he was too young to understand. "And your great-great-grandfather came and said he'd take the night watch. That's how our family began, with bravery and trust and love that lasted a lifetime." The baby cooed, and somewhere in the rafters, a dove took flight, its wings catching the light streaming through the open door. And if you listened carefully, you might have heard the echo of an old love story, still resonating through the years, still reminding everyone who heard it that the best things in life often come from the most unexpected moments. Cam and Molly lived out their final years in happiness and peace, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. When Cam passed in the winter of 1921, Molly held his hand and told him she loved him one last time, and he smiled at her with eyes that still held all the warmth and devotion of that first night. "I'll be waiting," he whispered. "Wherever we go next, I'll be there, ready to take the night watch." Molly followed him 6 months later in her sleep with a smile on her face. They were buried side by side on the hill next to her father, overlooking the ranch they had built together. The stone reads simply, "Cameron and Molly Walsh, beloved parents and grandparents, together in life and in death." But they were more than that. They were proof that love could bloom in the darkest moments, that courage and kindness could change the course of a life, that sometimes the most important decision you ever make is to trust a stranger who offers to help in the middle of a dark night. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren never forgot the story of how they met, that magical night in 1882 when everything changed. It became part of the family lore, passed down through generations, a reminder of where they came from and the values that had built their family. And on quiet nights when the moon was full and the wind whispered through the old stable, people swore they could sometimes hear the gentle murmur of voices, a man and a woman talking softly, keeping watch over the horses and over the land they had loved so well. It was probably just the wind, of course, just the creaking of old wood and the rustle of hay. But maybe, just maybe, it was Cam and Molly, still together, still in love, still keeping the night watch they had started so many years ago. Because some loves are too strong to be confined by something as simple as death, some bonds too deep to be broken by the passage of time. And the love between Cameron Walsh and Molly Brennan was exactly that kind of love, the forever kind, the kind that transcends everything and endures through all the ages. In the end, that's what made their story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the years. Not the danger they faced or the success they achieved, but the simple, profound truth at the heart of it all. That when you find the person who makes you whole, when you find the place where you belong, you hold on to it with everything you have. You protect it, you nurture it, you let it grow into something beautiful and lasting. Cam found that in Molly, and Molly found it in Cam. And from that finding came everything else, a lifetime of love and partnership and joy. A family that thrived for generations. A legacy that would never be forgotten. All because on one fateful night in 1882, a woman was sleeping in a stable to guard her horses, and a cowboy walked through the door and said 5 simple words that would change both their lives forever. "I'll take the night watch." And he did. For 20 years of marriage and a lifetime beyond, Cameron Walsh kept watch over Molly Brennan and everything they built together. He guarded her heart the way she had guarded those horses, fiercely and faithfully, with unwavering dedication. And she did the same for him, giving him the home and family and belonging he had spent years searching for. Their story became legend, but to them, it was simply life, simply love, simply the natural result of two people finding each other at exactly the right moment. They never took it for granted, never stopped being grateful for the chance encounter that had brought them together. Right up until the end, they marveled at their good fortune, at the serendipity that had placed them in the same place at the same time. And really, isn't that what all great love stories are? Two people finding each other against all odds, choosing each other every day, building something lasting and beautiful together. Cam and Molly's story just happened to start in a stable on a dangerous night, with gunshots and horse thieves and the kind of courage that changes everything. But it could have started anywhere. In a church, on a street, at a dance. The where and how doesn't matter as much as the what comes after. And what came after for Cam and Molly was a lifetime of happiness, a family that would carry their legacy forward, and a love story that would inspire generations. That's the real magic of their tale. Not that it was particularly extraordinary, but that it was extraordinarily ordinary. Two people meeting, falling in love, choosing each other, building a life. It happens every day all over the world, but when it happens right, when it happens true, it's the most powerful force in existence. Cam and Molly knew that. They lived it every day of their lives together. And because they did, because they honored and cherished what they had found in each other, they created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. The ranch endures. The family continues. The love story lives on. And somewhere in some place beyond this one, a cowboy and his wife sit together watching over it all, their hands clasped, their hearts intertwined, still keeping the night watch, still guarding what matters most, forever.